Welcome to Powered by Ancestry. I'm your guide and host, Kwesi Kunadu. On this episode, our topic will be spiritual forces, also known as shrines, and dreams. Now, those who've been with us for some time, there's another episode I have on dreams that you can check out. For those of you that are new or interested in this topic, we're going to take a slightly different approach. You see, the question was asked during one of the videos that were shot earlier about what role do shrines, quote unquote, or spiritual forces, I prefer, have in relationship to dreams. And so this is how I want to tackle that question. First, spiritual forces. Among African peoples and people of African ancestry, there are a range of forces of nature, that is, spiritual forces that inhabit or reside in nature. Whether those features of the land be rivers, lakes, streams, larger bodies of water, they could be mountains, hills, plateaus. They could also be the dense deciduous tropical forests, or they could be a savanna. They could also be formations like rock shelters and caves. And so whatever the land formation or feature might be, those features in fact inhabit or inhabited by, on a transitory basis, these spiritual forces. I want to be very clear. This is not about animism, meaning African or African peoples worship the rocks or worship the river, worship the stone. They don't. And I want to be very clear about that. What they do is acknowledge the presence of these spiritual forces in those features at certain times, meaning they're not always there. But at certain moments, they are there. For example, think about you going to your favorite park or part of the park where it's so relaxing and so open to being meditative or just being unstressed. In that area, a part of the park, among those trees, you feel a certain presence, a certain calm, a certain comfort. We're talking about the same thing. Meaning that there's an energy, there's a feel, there's a vibe about that park, a part of the park. It could be your backyard, if you have a backyard. It could be a certain part of your house, your quiet space, where when you are there, you feel in your element. That's what we're referring to here. So no, Africans don't worship trees, don't worship rocks, don't worship twigs or branches. They do not worship bodies of water. What they do, like most indigenous people in the world, they acknowledge the existence of certain kind of spiritual presence in those animate, or in this case, physical features of the land. And so these spiritual forces, they inhabit nature and the natural world in the varieties of ways, the varieties of forms. And where they inhabit and where they make this presence known tell us something about their characteristics. And so, for example, I have a spiritual force that comes from a river, actually two of them. And that's what I work with. Now, in part, those spiritual forces and I have a connection precisely because water is my element. And you may have an element that is either wind or fire or water. Whatever the element might be, there is a category of spiritual forces that come from or come through that element. So because water is my element, I have these river-based spiritual forces called Abusum in the Akan Tree language. And these two spiritual forces come from a particular river called the Tano River, which is the most sacred river in all of Ghana and among the Akan peoples in particular. And so these two spiritual forces, they work with me through dreams in a number of ways. And so unlike ancestors who do in fact visit me through dreams, these spiritual forces, I don't see them in terms of their form because they're spirits who have not had a human existence or human experience. So which means they won't have a bodily form. And I want you to understand that. In other words, unlike ancestral spirits that have had a human experience, that have transitioned and have had a bodily form, a physical form like you and I, flesh and matter, they, the spiritual force of nature, don't have bodily forms, never had bodily forms, which means that they will not appear in a bodily form. It means, therefore, when they do appear in my dreams, and if you have certain access to, certain sensitivities to these spiritual forces of nature, they will appear to you as anyone. That is, they take on the form of a human being, right? To be able to what? Communicate with you as a mortal. You see, these spiritual forces, if they stay too long in our world, then they may put harm or put our bodies, our human bodies, our fragile bodies into harm's way. Think of it this way. Have you ever been shocked by either sticking a utensil in an outlet, or you've been shocked by rubbing your feet on the rug and you touch someone, or you touch the hot pot and you jump back quickly? However way you've been touched by a form of energy, whether it's heat or electricity, you have felt what it's like to have a spiritual force inside your body. So when the spiritual forces come inside my body, right, and they want to communicate a message or insight or offer a therapeutic remedy for this client, that spiritual force inhabits my mortal body. Meaning they are wired into my circuitry, into my nervous system, into my bodily systems, right? And as such, because they're now in a mortal's body, that is a spiritual force in the mortal's body, it can stay there long because it will damage my organs. It will damage my bodily features because just like electricity stays long in the body, it will fry us. And I hope you're getting my analogy here. So whether it's heat or electricity, the same thing with the spiritual force. In our human bodies, it can inhabit it only temporarily, only as a transitory state, because otherwise it will damage the body because the body can't accommodate that energy at that frequency, because it is what? Not an ancestral force that had a bodily form, which is accustomed to what? Living inside a human body. And so for ancestral forces, they'll come to us in different forms. They'll be in a form that you don't recognize. You say, who is that? Somebody came to my dream. Some woman, some man, even a child may come to you as a spiritual force. And the question becomes, well, how do I know it's a spiritual force? Well, it takes time. By time, I mean it takes time getting accustomed to the persistence. In other words, I used to have a dream with an old man and an old woman for years. And they would look like two older men and women that I knew in real life who lived in D.C., Washington, D.C. But I knew it wasn't them. Now, I did not know that the two of them were, in fact, spiritual forces. But years later, I came to understand that indeed they weren't. Here are the clues. A, they're unfamiliar as ancestors. Look through your family photos, look through images, the descriptions, and other kinds of clues about your known ancestors. If you lack any of those kinds of evidences, then talk to them. In the dream, are you an ancestor? How do I know you? Or how do you know me? And they'll let you know. So if they're not an ancestor, either by way of evidence or by way of conversation in your dream, then you know they're a spiritual force. So these two figures, the old man and the old woman, they were spiritual forces. In fact, one of them was from the river, which I didn't know until a little bit later. So they came in the form of a what? An old man that I respect. They came in the form of an old woman who was married to that old man that I also respect. And they would talk to me. They would sometimes admonish me. They would tell me, don't ask questions you know the answers to, which means ask better questions or different questions. They would guide me. They would tell me, I like what you're doing. Do more of that. Or they would say, try this. This is what we have to prepare ourselves in our dreams to distinguish spiritual forces from ancestors. Ask the figures you see as to who they are and their relationship with you, because it could be an ancestor you're not aware of, or use your evidences from your family history research to kind of figure out if it's an ancestor from your family. If it isn't either of those, more than likely it's a spiritual force. And they too you can ask, who are you? Why are you here? Why do you appear in my dreams? How are we connected? And they will respond to you. It may not be exactly in that dream, but they'll respond to you over time as the connection builds and as the pattern of their appearance becomes more frequent or more persistent. But indeed, these spiritual forces offer another layer of information, of data, of insight through our dreams. But because this spiritual force is unbounded by the rules of our human existence, they also can speak to you or connect with you or communicate to you outside of your dreams, the same way that an ancestor could. And usually there is a space where they may do that. So if you want to invite and cultivate that relationship, I suggest in your home or around or outside your home, if you have a backyard, cultivate a quiet place. Cultivate a space that is devoted to your one-to-one connection with those spiritual forces that you want to invite and imbibe. And let your ancestors guide you, because they'll tell you what sacred animals, what sacred forces, spiritual forces that is, ride with your ancestry, ride with your family, accompany your family. And they'll clarify for you, whether it be under the name of an Abusum among the Akan, Orisa among the Yoruba, whether it's Haitian Vudum or the Loas or the Vudum, or it could be other kinds of Africa-based spiritualities or formations. They'll guide you. They'll clarify for you. And so as always, that ancestral touch will be necessary to make clear the presence and the utility of those spiritual forces in your dream and in other ways in your life. I'm Kwesi Kunadu. I've been your guide and host for this episode of Powered by Ancestry. Please put your comments, questions, or suggestions for other episodes in the comment section below. Look forward to seeing another episode. Stay well.